Okay. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's session, today's lesson on effective user stories, writing effective user stories and acceptance criteria. My name is John. I'm a business analyst and product owner, and I'm going to be delivering this session today. In this session, for the next hour or so, I'm going to try and time box it for 1 hour, but we'll be exploring the fundamental techniques and guidelines that are used for creating clear and actionable user stories and acceptance criteria as well. So as BAs, aspiring BAs, these skills are absolutely crucial when it comes to effective communication and collaborating with your team, especially when you're dealing with agile projects. Okay, so what we will cover in this session, we're going to look at an introduction to user stories, what they're all about, how they're structured. We'll look at also the user story basics. I'm going to give you the benchmark and framework for how you write your user stories. We're going to looking at how these user stories can actually be effective. So we'll look at good examples of user stories and also not so good examples as well. And we will be comparing those. We also will be looking at how we can create well-defined acceptance criteria. And we will also look at refining and prioritizing user stories. And last but not least, if anyone has any questions, I'll open up the floor for the questions, and then we will, we'll then end the session. So it shouldn't take too long. Like I said, I want to try and time box this for 1 hour, and yeah, that'll be that. So yeah, let's commence. So let's start off with the user story basics or introduction to it. And first of all, what is a user story? Good question. And the answer is simple. User stories are short, simple descriptions of a feature that is told from the perspective of the person who desires the new capability, usually a user or customer of the system. Now, that may or may not make any sense now, but as you go along through the course of this program, what a user story is, how it works, the function of it, and the purpose and benefit of it will become clear. But simply put, user stories are a way that you capture requirements from the perspective of end users or from the perspective of stakeholders. So they're short, simple descriptions of a feature, something that we want to do from the perspective of the person that's desiring this new feature, this new capability, and we list this small user story and use it to capture requirements so that the rest of the team can understand what is needed. So user stories consist of 3 components. Okay, you need to remember this. Always remember this when it comes to user stories, these 3 components that user stories are made up of. The first one is role. Okay, so the first thing is the role. And this will begin to make sense as we put it together. Role, this next one rhymes with it, is goal. And the next one, the next component is benefits. Okay, so you've got role, goal, and benefit. These are the 3 components that user stories are made up of. Yeah, bear with me. Okay, so they're composed in the following format. So remember we said role, goal, and benefit. So we write user stories and we say as A, then the role, I want, then the goal, what is it you want? So who are you as a, who are you, the role? I want, the goal, and then so that, the benefit. Okay, so role, goal, benefit, and they're composed in the following format: as a, I want, so that. Remember in the last session that we did, the gathering requirements session, I briefly touched on as a, I want, so that. This is how you compose a user story, and it's composed in this format: as a role, who you are, I want, the goal, so that, the benefit. Okay, and we're going to go along, look at some examples, and it will all begin to make a little bit more sense as well as we go along. Okay, so let's look at how we make sure that these stories are effective. Yeah, how to write effective user stories. And there are two things that you need to do. The first thing you need to do is identify user personas and their needs to create the user stories that address their specific requirements. This ties in with what we discussed in the last session, gathering requirements. So the first thing you're doing when you're writing user stories, number one, you're identifying who the user is as a, the role. Identify the role. Who's this person that's using this? Is it a user? Is it a registered user? Is it a visitor of this site? Is it just a registered user? What is the persona? Who's the actor that is using this product? What are their needs? Find out what the need is. And then you create the user story that addresses their specific requirements. The second thing to do when writing effective user stories is to apply what we call the INVEST criteria. And this will help to ensure that the user stories that you're writing are well formed. Okay, so we're going to look at this INVEST criteria. I'm going to tell you what this acronym stands for. The I, the N, the B, E, S, T, they all stand for certain components or features of a user story, an effective user story, if you apply this criteria. And if you are using this, almost like when you set goals, you set SMART goals, which we say is smart, measurable, attainable, etc. This is the INVEST criteria that is used for user stories. So the first thing that user stories must be when using the INVEST criteria is independent. I stands for independent. Okay, you want to remember this. And user stories should be independent. They should be self-contained, and they shouldn't be dependent on others or other features of a site. It should be, or features of a program or product. It should be self-contained and independent. So that means that they can be developed and tested by themselves. They can be developed and tested in any order. They shouldn't have any dependencies on any other user stories to be completed or function properly. If I have this user story, I must be able to see it from the beginning of it to the end, because it's independent and it can be developed and tested by itself without anything else and in any order. So that's what I mean. So if you're writing your user story, you make sure it's independent. Next, you need to make sure that your user story is negotiable, which is what N stands for the INVEST criteria, negotiable. So user stories should be negotiable, and they should be flexible and open to discussions with stakeholders, right? So you should be able to have open discussions about your user stories between the product owner, development team, your Scrum team, your developers, your stakeholders. They're not set in stone. They're not rigid. You have to be stubborn about your goal in terms of what you're trying to do, but be flexible about the method. So stories should be able to be refined. They should be able to be adjusted when needed. And this will encourage effective communication with your stakeholders, effective communication with your team, And it also ensures that the user stories that you're writing are adaptable. Okay, so there's not fixed, it's not rigid. User stories, it's not like a tree. It has to be like water, and it has to be flexible, and it has to be negotiable. So I, independent, N, negotiable, 3, or V rather, should be valuable. Yeah, so user stories should provide some value to the end users or to the stakeholders. Your user story should provide some value. And when your user story provides value to the end users, it's like it's addressing a specific need. It's solving a problem. You're delivering a benefit. That's the whole point of this user story. There must be some reason why we need this, and it has to be valuable. And once you place value, or you place the need or the problem that you're solving against a user story, this will help you as a BA when it comes to prioritizing your user stories. Right? So you're prioritizing your user stories based on their value, right? And so the most valuable user stories, or the most valuable features, those are the ones that are developed first. We start off with the most valuable stuff, and then we work our way down. So it has to be valuable, and you measure that value, and whichever is most valuable, what's most important, we deal with that first. We don't deal with the things that are not valuable first, we deal with those last. Okay, the next one is E, and E stands for estimated, because user stories should be able to be estimated. And we say estimated, which is in terms of effort or complexity. So as a team, you should be able to reasonably estimate the size or the effort required to develop a user story. How long is it going to take us? How much effort is needed? How much resources is needed for developing or completing this story so that it meets the definition of done? Okay, so estimation will help you when it comes to planning. It will help you when it comes to the allocation of your resources. It helps you as well when it comes to setting expectations for delivery timelines. You know that we've estimated this story will take us this much time, or this many hours, or this much effort. So if it can be estimated, then it meets the criteria of what makes an effective user story. The next one, S. S is for small. So user stories do not need to be dissertations. It's not a report. It's not an essay. It needs to be small enough to be completed within a single sprint. So you don't want to have a story that's so big that, you know, that can't be completed in a sprint. It needs to be small. You need to break down user stories into smaller, manageable pieces. So, and this will help to, you know, get faster feedback, reduce the risks. And if you remember from our last session, it will also help to mitigate any problems that happen, and you won't end up with a robot when you need a dolly. Okay, so it provides the opportunities that you need as a BA for development that's incremental, that's in stages. It's not just a rush, it's a small process we take each step by step. So each user story must be small, not big. So when estimating your stories, if you see that the estimation is too big, you can break it down and make it smaller. And finally, the last one is T, which stands for testable. Okay, so your user stories should be testable. This ensures that they can be validated against the acceptance criteria, the specific acceptance criteria. Can we test this thing? If I'm saying that with the role and the goal and the benefit that I want, can it be tested? Can I test this feature, or can I test this action, or test this event that I want to occur? Yeah, so by following this invest criteria, as a BA, you can ensure that your user stories are well formed. You can ensure that your user stories are clear. You can ensure that your user stories are effective. You can ensure that your user stories are actionable. Yeah, this is going to lead to you having much better collaboration with your teams. It's going to allow you to prioritize your stories, because you remember you're using it, making sure it's valuable. How valuable is it? So you're prioritizing your stories based on the value, and you will inevitably have improved delivery in your agile projects. Okay, so let's look at an example of a story, quick example of the user story. So we said as a role, so a registered user, not just a user, you have to be registered. This is a role, a registered user. As a, I want to be able to reset my password. This is the goal. What's the benefit of this? So that I can regain access to my account if I forget it. Okay, so this is independent, this is negotiable, this is valuable, this can be estimated. As you can see, this is small, and this is definitely testable. We can test this. Okay, this is an example of an effective user story. I want you to remember that user story, by the way, this user story here. Remember it, because we're going to be looking at this whole resetting password journey and looking at good examples and also not so good examples as well. So moving forward, let's look at creating well-defined acceptance criteria. So we've got user stories. Now we're going to acceptance criteria. What is acceptance criteria? Acceptance criteria is where you're defining the specific conditions that have to be met for a user story to be considered as done. We spoke about this password. So what are the specific conditions that have to be met for that user story to be considered as done? That's what we call acceptance criteria. Your acceptance criteria, when you're writing it, has to be clear. Your acceptance criteria has to meet the invest criteria as well, which is, you know, you got the testable as well as part of it. It has to be small. It has to meet those as well, and it has to not be ambiguous, so that you have a shared understanding amongst your team and with your stakeholders as well about what is required. Okay, now there's a following format that's used to structure acceptance criteria. We had the format for the user stories, role, goal, benefit, what to remember, and there's a format that's used to structure your acceptance criteria. Okay, so I need you to remember this. This one is given, when, then. These are words that should be rolling off your tongue. It's the benchmark and framework for writing effective user stories. So the role, goal, benefit, given, when, then. As a role, I want, goal, so that, benefit. Then we've got given, when, and then. What is given? Given describes the precondition or the initial context that is necessary for a specific scenario. That's what the given is. That describes that context. The when specifies the specific action or the specific event that occurs. And finally, the then states the expected outcome or the result that should take place, right? That should be observed. Okay, so we're going to look at an example of that. But given, when, then. Given this precondition has happened, when this action takes place, then I want this to happen. This is the format that is used for acceptance criteria. So let's go back to the example that we looked at before, As a registered user, I want to be able to reset my password so that I can regain access to my account if I forget it. Now we are doing the acceptance criteria. So remember, as a role, the role is the registered user. I want goal to be able to reset my password. That's the goal. So that the benefit is so that I can regain access to my account if I forget it. So given the precondition, given that I'm on the password reset page, I have to be on this. This is the precondition, the context of the when that's about to show next. When specific action, when I enter my email address and click the reset password button, this is the specific action, then an email should be sent to my registered email address with a password reset link. Yeah, I hope you're following me. So it's precondition, specific action, and the expected outcome. This is your precondition when you're on the password reset page. This is your specific action. When I enter my email address and I click, this click is the action. Clicking what? The reset password button. This is very, very specific. It doesn't say scroll, it doesn't say hover, it doesn't say enter, it says you have to click that button. Then the expected outcome is that an email should be sent to my registered email address with a password reset link. Okay. So we've started off with the user story. We're now writing the acceptance criteria, given when then, but it's not finished. We have not yet got to the goal that we have here of being able to reset my password so that you can regain access to your account. This is the goal here. We want to do this. We want to be able to reset my password. If you've done this, acceptance criteria, your password is not reset yet. All you've done is you've gone on the password reset page, you've entered your email address, clicked the reset button, and an email has been sent to your registered email address with a link. Is your password reset? No. And this is what we want to do. So we continue with the acceptance criteria. So what did I do next? Before we do that, this is good. This is good. But we want to make this better. Okay, we want to make this better. And one thing about me when I use these, when I'm writing user stories, acceptance criteria, I refrain from a particular word, which is this one over here, should. An email should be sent. We have to be, remember, we're writing specific, we want specific outcomes, specific expected outcomes. So we don't say should. We get rid of that word and we replace that word with must. Okay, because if you say should, then that means it should happen, but if it doesn't, okay, or it might happen, then an email might come to my email address. If I write a story and I say, given that I'm on the password reset page, when I enter my email address and click the reset button, then an email might be sent to my registered email address. I mean, there's a might, not too sure, but if it's a must, that means this is a non-negotiable expected outcome. This must happen. If we say should, so for example, you might have a feature on a website where if you have maybe low internet speed, a pop-up might appear, depending on what browser you're using, a pop-up might appear. It may or may not. There you can say, yeah, a pop-up can appear. That makes sense, it can appear, it might appear, it could appear. You can say it could appear. That means if it does, great. If it doesn't, it's okay. It could appear. But we're saying that this email must be sent. It's an order. It's a direct instruction that this email must be sent. Not should, not maybe, not might. It must be sent. So that's how we go from good, better to best when it comes to effective user stories. Let's continue with the journey. So now, given that I received the password reset email, when I click on the password reset link within 24 hours, this is a specific action that's testable, by the way, because if you click on the password reset link and it's been 25 hours and it still allows you to reset, that means that the acceptance criteria has not been met. If it gets to 23 hours and it doesn't allow me to reset my password and it says it's too late, that means the acceptance criteria has not been set. The QA will come in and test this. They will reset the link. They will wait 24 hours on the dot. And if they're not able to reset the password, this is classed as a bug. It's failed. It's not met the acceptance criteria. So the precondition is that I've received the password reset email. When specific action, I click on the password reset link within 24 hours, specific action, then the expected outcome from this, then I must be directed to a page where I can enter a new password. We've still not changed the password though, so we continue. Given that I enter a new password and confirm it, the precondition, the specific action is when I click the submit button, then my password must be successfully reset. Okay. So now that given that my password is reset, when I log in with my new password, then the expected outcome, I must be able to access my account successfully. So you can see how this has given us a benchmark or a framework, and we use this given when then we use that as a role, I want goal, so that benefit framework when it comes to writing user stories, how it helps to ensure that the user stories are clear and that the user stories are effective. Okay, so we've looked at good examples, which is great, but we want to look at some not so good examples. So let's look at this story here. So this is the same scenario, but this is a user story that's written not so well. So as a BA, you do not want to write user stories like this. As a user, what kind of user? I want to be able to reset my password if possible, so that I can log in. The role is not clear, it's not defined. As a user, do I have to be registered? Do I have to be, any user? If you're just a user of the product, if you're a user of a site but you're not registered, how can you reset your password? It's not clear. I want to be able to reset my password if possible. The goal is not really clear. You want to be able to reset it. The benefit is not clear either, so you can log in. That's not the benefit. The benefit, if you remember, if I pull up the benefits, is here so that I can regain access to my account if I forget it. This is why we need this story. It's not so you can log in, it's so that you can regain access to your account if you forget it. So that's an example of that we needed, not just so that I can log in. It's about regaining access to that account if you forget it. That is the benefit. Okay. Given that a user forgets their password, when they want to reset it, then they should be able to do so. No, the precondition, they forget their password. When specific action, they want to reset it, there's no specific action there. It just says when they want to reset it, then they should be able to do so. That's not the expected outcome, and it's not testable. How can you test this? If you go back to your invest criteria, how can I test that if a user forgets their password, they want to reset, that they should be able to do so? It's not testable. But with the other stories that we had that we have an email link that's sent. When I click on it within a certain time, 24 hours, and I do it, then I must be able to go to the website and log in again, etc., etc., etc. This is testable. That one was independent. That one was negotiable. That one was, negotiable. We can say rather than 24, can we make it 48? Should we make it 72? It's negotiable. It's valuable. It can be estimated. It's small and it's testable. Okay, so those two criteria, those two tips I gave to you for write an effective user story, which was identifying those user personas and their needs to create the user stories that address the specific requirement, and also applying the invest criteria. That again will help you to make sure that your user stories are well formed, so that you don't end up with a user story that looks like this, and then you get a man that looks like this giving you a thumbs down. This is not good. Uncle Jide doesn't think it's good either. Okay, moving on, we're going to talk about refining and prioritizing user stories. And this meeting looks like it may end sooner than I anticipated. But yeah, so another thing that we have when we're writing user stories is what we call refinement sessions. Okay, so you have periodic refinement sessions where after you've wrote the user story, you then come and refine those stories. Refining those stories and having those sessions will help you to add detail, clarify requirements, and it also addresses any questions or concerns that you may have before like sprint planning. Okay, so during these sessions that you have for refinement, the team will collectively work on maybe like adding more detail or clarifying any of the requirements, or maybe they can even break down the user stories into smaller, more manageable pieces. If they're too big, if they think it's too big, they can just refine those stories. And having these refinement sessions will ensure that the user stories are well understood and that you have a shared and mutual understanding amongst your whole team. It will reduce the problems you have. You won't end up, it will stop you from ending up with a robot instead of a dolly. Reduce any misunderstandings or any ambiguities, anything like that. And these refinement sessions are good. So these refinement sessions, you put them in whilst you're writing your stories as BAs. You also hold refinement sessions where you refine the stories that you've already written. And then once those stories are, of course, approved, then they can be committed. But we'll get into all of that approved state, committed state, in another session. I'll show you briefly about that on the Azure board at the end. But yeah, that's what we'll do with refinement sessions. When we spoke about making sure that your user stories are valuable, I also spoke about how the value that's placed on the user story determines how it's prioritized. Okay, so when we're prioritizing user stories to be committed, we have to make sure that these user stories are aligned with the business value and the business strategic goals. And you have to consider the impact that it has on the overall project objectives and the priorities. Okay, so by doing that, by prioritizing your user stories and making sure that they're in alignment with the goals of the business, with the goals of the team, with the requirements of the stakeholders after you've gathered them, as a BA, you can ensure that the most valuable and the most impactful features are developed first. Okay, so this will help maximize the value that's delivered to the end users, and also for your stakeholder management to keep them satisfied. It will also maximize the value that's been delivered to the end users and also the business, ensuring that the resources that they've put in place are allocated efficiently. And it's always in line with whatever the project's strategic direction is. Okay, so what you want to be doing as a BA is you want to be conducting, user story reviews that include your stakeholder, that includes your development team, with these refinement sessions and product owners, and you're basically making sure that you have a shared understanding of those requirements. As a BA, you want to be able to capture feedback during these sessions, capture the feedback during these reviews, and you want to make sure that you're incorporating any necessary changes. Remember, this is agile, so you're making changes now. We have to be fluid and adaptable, negotiable with our stories. So you want to incorporate those changes where necessary so that you can improve the quality of your user stories and improve the accuracy of your user stories as well. What else do you want to do? You want to validate these user stories by verifying that they meet the stakeholder expectations. Okay, and making sure that they're in alignment with the business objectives and that they're also providing the desired value. Okay, so that is user stories and acceptance criteria in a nutshell. I'm going to quickly recap over this, and then I'll open up the floor for any questions if there are any. And then, yeah, we'll look at Azure Board in detail in another session, how we literally place them on there, but we'll look at that. But just to recap on what has been discussed today, remember, user stories consist of 3 key components. The first one, remember, is role, to help you remember this. The second one rhymes with it. Goal. And the last one is benefit, right? And remember, we write our user story as a I want goal so that benefit. Yeah. So as a registered user, or as a visitor, or as a registered user of a particular website or mobile application, I want the goal so that the benefit. Okay, I remember the acceptance criteria format, again, to recap on this: given, when, and then. So we use this structure, we use this format to structure the acceptance criteria, and the given describes the context or the precondition. So given that I am something, when something else happens, which is a specific action or event, then the expected outcome or result that I'm expecting should happen. Yeah, okay, so last but not least, this is the Azure board, what it looks like. We'll get to this in more detail in another session, but a lot of this stuff you will know by literally getting hands-on and writing on it and knowing how this works. But when we pull up our product backlog item to write the user story, obviously you write the title of the user story here, just put example here, and here in this place where we have description, that's where we will write the user story as a I want so that. So you'd fill this in as a I want so that, etc. Acceptance criteria, given, when, and then. So you put that here in this section over here. When you're writing your user stories as well, you make sure that you assign it to yourself so you know who's responsible for this. This is helpful when you want to go to see, who wrote the story, when it was written, especially when you go to the history, which is just here, when you look at the history of the story, so you can see the journey that the story has taken, when it was written, when it was approved, when it was committed, when it was in development, when it was being tested, and how long it took. Be able to see that on there, and obviously that measures up with all your metrics. So you assign it. this is currently unassigned. The state of the ticket or the product backlog item is put here. So obviously this one here is here as new, but you could have that as in BA or ready for BA, or you can have it as approved or committed or in dev or dev done or in QA, QA done, UAT, and then done. So yeah, I think we've looked at that when we looked at setting up the Azure board, but yeah, this is where you select the state, the area, the reason, the sprint or iteration. And here you can have discussions about this particular ticket. So if this is about the password reset feature and something, there was wanted to make a comment about whether it should be 24 hours or 20 or 48 hours, you can write a comment here. It's been suggested that we change this to be 48 hours as opposed to 24 hours. You add the necessary people, amend it, because it's agile, save and close, and it's now been updated. And we also see that in the history as well. Here you'll see details about it. So priority, what's the priority of this? How important is this? And obviously when it's been developed, you'll be assigned to a developer, will be here, and a QA will be here. But we'll get to Azure, but I thought let me throw in a screenshot of this here, and then we'll look at this in a bit more detail, and we will begin to start writing our own user stories on the Azure board. Okay, so if you have been fortunate enough to make it until the end of this session, you have the privilege of shaking my virtual hand. Just stretch out your hand right now. There we go. That's it. Give it a shake. Don't be shy. Go ahead. It's okay. I know my knuckles are dry. Just shake them, shake it. Okay, fantastic. I've not run out of words. I wanted to keep this short, sweet, simple, straight to the point. We've looked at user story and acceptance criteria, how to write them effectively. I've shown you the framework, the benchmark that's used, how you structure them, the role, goal, benefit, given, when, then. You need to remember that. And yeah, I hope that this has been of some value to you, and I will open up the floor for some questions, comments, suggestions, feedback. If you thought this was a complete waste of your time and I was just talking gibberish, do let me know. I will not be offended. I'll just look at it as constructive criticism. But yeah, do let me know how this has been for you, and maybe like on a scale of 1 to 5, how you felt about user stories and acceptance criteria before this session and how you feel about it now. Bearing in mind, even though we've obviously done the session, once you get hands-on and you start writing user stories, I would also be helping you to also refine them. And it's in those places that we'll begin to make sure that they're structured properly. So I don't expect anyone to have this session and then go ahead on Azure DevOps and you just write perfect user stories. But it's in writing those imperfect user stories that we're able to give feedback and constructive criticism to say, hey, I don't think you should do like this, or I might ask you some questions to say, what kind of user? Is it a registered user or is it a normal user? Is that the goal that you really want? Is that what you call a benefit? And you start to think about how you're structuring it so that you can become a good BA that writes effective user stories. And the sign of an effective user story, a good, clear, concise, effective user story, is that when you get to your sprint planning and you're reading out the user stories that you're going to commit into sprint, that your QAs, your developers have nothing to say. They're just like, yep, sounds good to me. Yep, happy with that. They quickly estimate and go. If they're going to your user story and saying, oh, what do you mean by we have to, when I log in, I have to click a link. Where's the link sent to? you haven't made it clear, the journey clear, that is when you're not writing effective user stories. So I always say when it comes to sprint planning, in the absence of any questions or comments, I'm assuming that this story is good to go. Let's go ahead and commit. With that being said, I've left 10 minutes. I'm happy that we've time boxes for an hour. Please do give me some feedback, comments, suggestions. You can signify, no, just unmute yourselves. I don't know if I can see hands whilst I'm sharing my screen. But yeah, any questions, comments will be much obliged. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Anybody? I hope I've been heard. Have I been talking to myself for the past 50 minutes? That would be a shame. Oh dear. I don't think I'll be recording this again if I have. B, Demi, Ola Sukami, Samediong Esias. Talk to me.
Hello, this is Ola Sukami.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, I've listened all through the presentation. I think I'm getting it right. I don't really know much about it. All I know is storyboard. That was what I know before, but now I'm getting. So my plan is that after the lecture, I'll just go through the presentation again so that I will get much about it. Okay.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you for your feedback, comments. So much appreciated. Anyone else before I shut the doors to this room? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. In the absence of any other questions or comments, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. I hope it's been helpful. I'm going to stop recording now, and I hope you have a wonderful evening and a fantastic week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. So yeah, feel free to leave the breakout room and go about your evening. This session that's been recorded, the recording will be made available for us as well, so we can recap again. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for your time and have a great evening. Thank you.
Good evening, John. Hello. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
I'm really sorry. My network has been so bad
Oh
today.
dear, no
Yeah.
problem.
I wanted to ask the recording, where are you going to send it to?
The recording will be sent to the admin. Will send it out to the
Okay, why I'm asking is because I'm just joining this BA to under 25 for the first time.
Okay.
Because I didn't know there was B under 25. I usually join the regular BA. So I just saw the B under 25 today and I joined it. My
Have
network
you
was really
have you
bad.
have you registered as B as a U25 student?
I actually paid as a U25 student, but I didn't know about it. It's just today I just saw the BA U25 and I joined.
Okay, so U25 is for it's a specific project for U25, and there is actually an acceptance criteria similar to this for joining that particular group. It's very small group of under 25 BAs. There's something specific we're trying to do with this group, right? I can, on this occasion, if you're not registered as a BA, I can make the recording available to you at my discretion. However, if you're not in the U25 group, you won't be able to get the further links that we've had because it's a specific group that we're working with. And what we do is a little bit different to the other BAs. So I think there's a BA group that's happening right now with Olu.
Yes. I've been
Yeah.
joining that group since. I didn't know there was a BA under 25. I just saw it.
Okay. So are you under 25, number one?
Yes, yeah, I am.
Okay. Speak to your administrator, speak to your admin,
Okay.
tell them you're under 25, see if they can, see if they will let you, if they'll let you join. But there is an acceptance criteria for it.
All right.
And hold on, have I,
Okay.
am I still recording? Have I stopped? Am I
You
still,
are still recording.
I'm still,